During World War II, while the world faced an unprecedented conflict, a secret unit of the Imperial Japanese Army conducted some of the most inhumane experiments in modern history. Today, we delve into the dark history of Unit 731, how it originated, its inhuman experiments, and the legacy it left for humanity. In 1931, after Japan invaded Manchuria in northern China and established the puppet state of Manchukuo, the Japanese army took advantage of the situation to create secret military research facilities under the guise of modernizing the region. Among these facilities was Unit 731, founded in 1937 by Shiro Ishii, a Japanese military doctor with grand ambitions and a firm belief that human experimentation was essential for Japan's military success, particularly in preparation for potential biological warfare. The unit's official mission was to prevent epidemics and purify water. However, in reality, it was a cover for macabre experiments. Located in Pingfang near Harbin, Unit 731 was a massive complex equipped with laboratories, torture chambers, crematoriums, and testing fields. The facility was shrouded in secrecy, heavily guarded, with any escape attempts punished by execution. Prisoners, referred to as marutas, logs, were treated as disposable objects. Vivisections, dissection of living humans. Prisoners were subjected to vivisections without anesthesia to study the progression of diseases and the effects of injuries. These surgeries were performed while the subjects were still alive to observe, in real time, how internal organs were affected by diseases like bubonic plague, cholera, and typhoid. In addition, injuries caused by weapons such as grenades and bullets were inflicted deliberately, and vivisections followed to examine the damage. Deliberate infection with diseases. Prisoners were intentionally exposed to lethal pathogens, including bubonic plague, cholera, typhoid, and anthrax. The primary goal was to develop effective biological weapons and to understand the cycles and progression of diseases. Deliberate infection with diseases. Prisoners were intentionally exposed to lethal pathogens, including bubonic plague, cholera, typhoid, and anthrax. The primary goal was to develop effective biological weapons and to understand the cycles and progression of diseases. Freezing and cold resistance tests. To develop treatments for hypothermia in Japanese soldiers fighting in cold climates, prisoners had their hands and feet submerged in ice-cold water until they froze completely. Afterward, researchers studied tissue damage and tested reanimation methods, such as pouring hot water on the limbs or setting them on fire. Pressure chamber experiments. Prisoners were placed in airtight pressure chambers to study the effects of various altitudes and pressure changes on the human body. These experiments aimed to determine the limits of human endurance. Large-scale biological weapon testing. Entire populations were subjected to experiments to test the spread of biological agents. Aircraft dropped fleas infected with bubonic plague over Chinese villages, causing widespread epidemics. Water sources were poisoned with cholera and typhoid bacteria, and contaminated food was distributed to study the rate of disease propagation. In August 1945, as the Soviet offensive advanced into Manchuria, the Imperial Japanese Army began evacuating the region. Facing imminent defeat, Unit 731 was ordered to cease its activities. Shiro Ishii, the unit's commander, directed that the Pingfang complex be destroyed to eliminate evidence. Buildings were blown up and burned. Tanks of lethal bacteria were broken and dumped into rivers or buried, and documents detailing experiments were incinerated. To prevent prisoners from testifying against the perpetrators, many were executed. Some were poisoned while others were shot. With Japan's surrender, Shiro Ishii and other leaders of Unit 731 sought protection. They offered the United States data from their human experiments in exchange for immunity from war crimes prosecution. The US government accepted the offer, driven by its interest in biological warfare data amid rising cold war tensions with the Soviet Union. Detailed reports on human resistance to diseases, biological weapons, and torture were handed over. As a result, Ishii and other scientists from Unit 731 were never tried for their crimes. Instead, many found employment in academia, hospitals, and Japan's pharmaceutical industry. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union captured some Unit 731 officers who failed to escape during the Manchurian invasion. In 1949, these individuals were tried during the Khabarovsk trials in the USSR. The trials revealed detailed accounts of Unit 731's atrocities, including experiments with diseases and deliberate epidemics in Chinese villages. Despite their confessions, the sentences were relatively lenient, ranging from 2 to 25 years in Soviet labor camps. Shiro Ishii himself lived a quiet life after the war. He never faced justice, briefly going into hiding before returning to Japan, where he worked as a medical consultant. Ishii died of throat cancer in 1959. Estimates suggest that tens of thousands of people died as a direct or indirect result of Unit 731's activities. The majority of the victims were Chinese, but they also included Korean, Russian, and to a lesser extent, Western prisoners of war. These individuals were dehumanized, referred to as marutas, or logs, by their captors. The data obtained from Unit 731's experiments influenced the development of biological weapons and medical practices in the post-war era, particularly in the United States. The immunity granted to Unit 731 scientists remains one of the most glaring examples of post-war injustice. Many victims never received compensation or formal recognition from the Japanese government for their suffering.
Estima-se que dezenas de milhares de pessoas morreram como resultado direto ou indireto dessas atividades. As vítimas eram em sua maioria chinesas, mas também incluíam prisioneiros de guerra coreanos, russos e, em menos escala, ocidentais. Eles eram tratados como marutas. A imunidade concedida aos cientistas é considerada um dos maiores exemplos de injustiça do pós-guerra. Muitas das vítimas nunca nem sequer receberam compensação ou reconhecimento formal por parte do governo japonês.